Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Detention, where Molly and Chris think about what they've done. We are joined here tonight by Tim Snow, who Chris is going to tell you a bit more about. But we're glad that you're here and excited to have you on board. Thanks for being here, Tim.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So for those of you out there that don't know, Tim is my last coach. I had three coaches over my career, and Tim was the apotheosis of all my coaches.
Huh.
And so you just got to slip those vocab words in where you can. English teacher. But Tim has been a triathlete since 1998 after focusing on running in high school and college. He was a former professional triathlete himself and now focuses on coaching professional and elite level age group athletes at QT2 Systems. Always a maximalist, Tim competed in over 250 multi-sport events in his racing days, and he carries all of that knowledge and experience into his work at QT2 Systems, where he now manages its day-to-day operations. Tim has both informed and been shaped by the QT2 philosophies, which are building aerobic efficiency through training at appropriate intensity levels, building physical durability through gradual volume increases, maximizing body composition, optimal race fueling, and suitable pacing while racing. He loves to identify and address specific athlete limiters, whether physical or mental, and he is especially well known for wearing a very specific cut of triathlon top while racing. Tim, welcome to Detention. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. As a former math teacher, I had to look up apotheosis.
What does it mean?
Looked it up it means the highest point of culminating factor, something like that.
Well, congratulations.
There you go.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Stupid question number one. Tell us about the Mankini. So you and I raced against each other a bunch in our early days of racing. And I always lived in fear of that particular moment in the run when you would speed past me with what looked like from the rear, basically a sports bra. So rather than just making fun of you about it, I know there has got to be a reason for it. And tell us about why you went with that particular look and approach.
Well, we were discussing a little bit today, back and forth via text. And you had said something about the Marlboro Tri, where I came in third, you came in second. And if you remember, probably I raced that in no shirt and probably a Speedo. And so when I was racing, if I could race nude, I would race nude. I tried to wear as little as possible. And what I found when I was racing is with a tri-top, I always ended up hiking it up when I was running. And so when I saw this as an available option, I said, well, that just makes it easier. I don't have to hike anything up. It's just there for me. So yeah, that was the reason. It's cool. It's cooling.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
This was an available option? This was not an alteration?
This wasn't a custom garment?
That was not an alteration.
Huh.
I don't know. Maybe it was woman's. I honestly don't know. I don't know. It came. I asked for it and it came. So
that's amazing.
For QT2, we had ordered it, and maybe Chrissy did some special for me and got me a woman's large or whatever. I don't know.
It's glorious.
Yeah, no alterations, none.
Amazing.
I thought that was a custom job.
No.
I thought that when you went home, you had you opened up your racing closet and there was just a sea of them just hanging there, one after another.
Didn't even occur. Well, it's funny because it didn't even occur to me until you just said something that maybe it was actually a woman's.
This is like a huge breakthrough here on Detention.
Yeah, right. So if you have the time, like a funny story, I was racing in St. Croix in whichever year it was, maybe it was 2008, and I was wearing that mankini, and I had a tendency, because I was an okay swimmer and weakish on the bike relative to the pro field, but I could run, that I would get mixed up in the women's pro race, all the time. I would just get stuck there. And so I was going down through some village in St. Croix, and people on the side of the road were cheering, the locals. and they said, fourth woman. And I said, I'm a man.
It's all the top. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you've worked with QT2 for a long time. Can you answer one of the questions that's on everybody's mind? With what does QT2 stand for?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. So I've been with QT2 Systems since 2007, and it stands for Quantitative Triathlon Training.
Awesome.
But so QT2 was founded by Jesse Kropelnicki, a notoriously structurally and engineering-minded person, right? And so quantitative.
Right.
And I will say that in our early years, we were extremely quantitative. We did a fantastic job of living up to our name, and it took time and we evolved that such that depends what you do with the two. So if you threw parentheses around the Q and the T and put the two on the outside, it could be quantitative and qualitative triathlon training. That's how I now think of it. We get two Qs because it took a long time for us to kind of break the model of only seeing things as from a quantitative sense and what and that athletes are in fact turns out human. And so
tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, when I figure it out, I will. That's that. So that's what it stands for officially.
So building on that, how else has QT2's approach changed since you've been there?
Well, definitely with the more qualitative stuff, for sure. A big heavy focus on mental fitness, what we call it. We actually have a certified therapist on staff to work with athletes who wish to utilize that kind of service, specific to sports psychology. When Jesse was doing his level 3 certification with USAT, he did it all on the idea of mental fitness and developing the theories around athletes who are motivated by the achievement of success versus athletes who are motivated by the fear of failure or the avoidance of failure, what we call MAF versus MAS or MAS versus MAF. And so that's one of the big ones. The other things that we have done at QT2 Systems is kind of expand our brand base. So we have a running specific brand called the Run Formula, which Beth Shutt manages. We have a cycling specific brand, and then we also have a studio that we like a indoor cycling and CompuTrainer type studio, which during this time of COVID is struggling.
We hear you.
As you might imagine. The other things that we've tried to do at QT2 Systems is, I would say, that how we've kind of evolved is, and it really goes to that qualitative mindset a bit, is to give athletes a little more in the way of, when QT2 athletes came on board, they were very much like this, right? It was created by a structural engineer. We had a lot of engineers as athletes and a lot of very high achievers where triathlon was like the priority in their life. And so we've tried to kind of take the qualitative mindset and open that up more towards athletes who like are doing this for a healthy lifestyle and have a good time, and not necessarily have it as a major priority. So I would say it's hard to describe all the different ways that the qualitative evolution has kind of expanded us, but that would be the major gravitational pull that we've had is from the qualitative standpoint.
That's awesome.
So this next question is one of those questions that could be perceived as like a putting you on the spot question, but I think it's more a question about like process and process and just the different ways that you might work. So you were my coach. We worked together for 2.5 years. It was awesome. What did you find most challenging about working with me?
Personality.
I'm on the spot.
You can
I'm
be
on
you
the
can,
spot.
you can be completely honest. Seriously, there's nothing you can say that will. This is all in service of talking about different kinds of approaches and things like that.
I can just say this. Okay. Okay. One would be probably balancing management of your demands outside of triathlon with your demands of and your expectations of yourself within triathlon. You were somebody who expected a lot of yourself athletically, but also at the same time was running and trying to grow a small business. And I would say that was a challenge. That was a challenge for you. The as it would be. The other thing I would say was, well, you have a very specific strength in your racing, which is your cycling, right? And you have two things that are better than the other, right? Your swimming, your cycling are better than your running, right?
Totally.
And like anyone, you would want to utilize those things, right? The only thing is, so you would probably tend to ride what I would consider to be inappropriately relative to what was going to be demanded of you for running, which kind of had a double whammy effect because you had a bike strength. You wanted to utilize that bike strength, okay? And that's going to affect anybody, right? But then if you also have a challenge in running, right, that's going to like hit you twice. Yeah. And then on top of that, there was probably a tendency to like get hit, like feel like, oh boy, shit, like that. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
No, don't worry about it.
We have a warning on our channel.
Yeah. There's no problem. Yeah, the FCC is not tuning in.
Yeah.
Like that Family Guy thing, right? So you would get hit by that physically, and then that would turn on you mentally. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, like I'm definitely an MAF athlete. I think you and I talked about that a bunch. Like, and then, if you start feeling bad, like that the possibility of failure is like right there, and I think that would really eat at me a lot.
I don't know that you were an MAF athlete all around. You're an MAF athlete relative to running. You were probably an MAS athlete on the bike, and so you and the issue. And I think honestly, this is why I think I fell in love with triathlon. Okay, was because my area, because I was an MAF athlete on the bike for sure, and an MAS athlete on the run, right? But the difference is you get to run last, right? And so I remember my first triathlon, I got demolished on the swim. I got beat even worse on the bike, but then I felt like a world-class athlete on the run, right? And so that was addicting, right? Whereas I all I did was, I got to end on a high, right? Whereas I mean, being a heavily like a strong swimmer and then declining from there must be really challenging mentally. But I guess it's not really a fair comparison because I just like my strengths lined up differently, right? From a mental standpoint, right? So I always had last say, right? You got your say in the middle, right? Yeah. But the same things that you were feeling on the run, I was feeling on the bike. I'm like, son of a bitch, how long am I gonna like? I can't let him get too much time, but I can't do anything about it, you know. And so, I guess that's a long-winded answer, but
no, that's great.
We love the long-winded answer.
Yeah.
Makes our job easy.
So I have had a chance to hang out with the two of you guys together. So I know that like you get along outside of the sport of triathlon as well. How important is click with athletes from a coach athlete relationship? Like how important is it that you get along with athletes?
I just won't even work with somebody I don't get along with.
Nice.
Like I'm lucky enough to be with QT2 and at a point in my, I don't know where I am in QT2 that I choose. Like if I don't want to work with somebody, I just don't work with them.
Awesome.
That's just not going to be. And the click is the most important. Like I honestly, I don't give a damn how fast they're going to be or do I coach some professional athletes? Yes. Okay. I also coach like very age group athletes, like very, I coach some elite age group athletes, but I also coach some very age group athletes, and they're all like, I just want somebody who's willing to try and get the best out of themselves and who I like.
Yeah, totally.
So
how do you tell if you click with them?
Well, how does one tell any,
it's just the moment.
you just kind of, you just know when you know. Well, I feel like if I could outline that in words, that would be worth that would save a lot of headache in the world. Well, there's things like, I guess somebody who you just enjoy to be around, or to correspond with, who somebody who you could talk training with and racing, or the current political climate with, or have an intellectual conversation. Like I guess that the topic is meaningless. That's, I guess maybe that's how I would
great.
know.
What's something that, and this is probably a lot of things, but what leaps to mind as something that you have changed your mind about in terms of training or coaching over the course of your career?
That's a lot. Daily. I actually owe somebody an apology because, and I had somebody I would never want to apologize to. I'm going to have to. But years ago, I went into a race. Maybe it was Kona, and I did not have a good race, but I went in at like prime race weight, prime race weight. But I was junk because I got the prime race weight, right? And so I could barely lift my legs up the stairs. And after that race, this particular person said to me, "Do you think maybe you got too low on the race weight?" And no, I was at optimal race weight. It couldn't be that. And upon reflection, maybe 15 years later, I think he was right. Things like that. I think that we QT2 got at times too hung up in the numbers, and there has to be a balance. Numbers are important, but they have to have a sanity check with them. They have to fit the human. And it's not only race weight that I'm talking about, but that's just an example of what I'm talking about. And so things like that, I think as I've learned, so we at QT2 create histograms for our athletes. They are a season plan, right? And we would sometimes fall into the trap of executing upon that histogram come hell or high water, right? And that was a very quantitative way to do things, right? And sometimes that's just not right for the person. And so I guess that as I learned more and became more comfortable with what I was doing, those kinds of things were specifically informed and changed in me around that. Yeah, I want an athlete to go in at uh, at race weight, but I don't necessarily think that race weight is a specific number. I'd rather an athlete go in a pound or two heavier than race weight and feel strong
Mm-hmm.
than be at race weight and limp into the
Mm-hmm.
event. If that makes sense.
Anemic, yeah, right.
That's But there's a whole body of things that I'm also referring to, not just race weight. It's like a mind, a little bit of a mind. I guess maybe early on when I was a triathlete for a long time before I started with QT2. I've been with QT2 since 2007, but early when I got in with QT2 and learning from Jesse the different philosophies, I went out and just kind of tried to mimic or execute upon those philosophies without necessarily thinking of for myself what they were. And maybe I was just being too strict on the literal interpretation of what a philosophy might mean rather than the spirit of what it might mean.
When you started coaching?
Yeah. And for years after,
How else
you get trained. I got trained in something.
Right.
I got trained in it, and I went and pressed the buttons, right? And then over time, I developed a sense of like, oh, maybe I shouldn't press all these buttons. Maybe,
I should leave some of the buttons.
Maybe I should think to myself. Yeah.
So you were still racing when you started coaching with QT2. How did that like once you started coaching and once you got the manual on how the buttons work, how did that change your race strategy and performance and approach?
Like worlds. I went from consistently last place pro in every Ironman or 70.3 event I did to doing well. I did okay. Like I came in 5th and 6th in some Ironman races, and I would go to an Ironman and feel like I'm going to come in top 8, like as opposed to just like dead last. I was always going to be dead last, and I think the biggest piece of that was the nutrition. I mean, I did 15 Ironman before I even thought like that I should consider nutrition.
Oh my God.
And then the idea of just being kind of smart around training. I was a very durable athlete as a pro, because I spent years before I was with QT2 just beating the literal hell out of myself in training. And so I became really durable, and applying some thought and maybe not beating myself up so much physically in the training, that made a big difference. Turns out recovery is a good thing.
Is it?
I think the race that we were talking about earlier, the Marlboro Lions triathlon, which might be the only triathlon where I've beaten you, because it was too short for allow you to run me down. I think you had done Ironman Germany the week before.
Oh my God.
Like, and you were renowned for that. Like, I think it was like, Ironman Germany was like late June in those years, and it was like your 4th of the year.
Yeah. I did do 4 that year, and I was absolutely toasted. Yeah, I remember that. It was a bad year. I mean, you said I'm a maximalist. There was something broken.
That's all right.
It was. Maximalist in everything but my clothing, as you can see behind you. There, I'm a minimalist.
Fashion.
And I mean, was it something about taking up coaching that changed you as an athlete there? Like, did that have some kind of interplay in the fact that you were teaching other people to do it that made you reconsider your own approach?
No, I was just an idiot. I had an ego. I had a massive ego, and it actually took a lot for me to even listen to Jesse, because he couldn't beat me in a race. And I had the mindset of like, well, what's he gonna teach me, right? It turns out a lot, right? But I had to kind of get myself away from that arrogance, and I thought I had it right. The other thing that I did, I'll say, that's probably screwed me up is growing up watching Rocky movies, right? And then especially Rocky 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then B, I bought a book on probably Scott Tinley's How to Train for Triathlon kind of thing.
Oh my God.
And in the back, I probably didn't read it, but the back had sample training weeks, and it had beginner, intermediate, advanced, pro. And I was like, whoa, I'm just going to do that. I'm going to do the pro one, the volumes. So I coupled those kind of volume requirements with just go run up the side of a mountain idea from Rocky 4.
Oh my God.
And I was just that was the approach in my head with what you had to do to be successful. It was wrong. So it made me durable,
mm-hmm.
right? And so then when I got some sense behind it, I didn't have to worry about the injuries or the durability factors or anything like that. But yeah, I guess the biggest shift was initially I had to get over myself and thinking that I knew everything, and listen to somebody else. That was the.
So with that as your as your exposure to the sport and your way into the sport, has that informed how you develop athletes? Do you focus on durability first? How do you work on athlete development?
Depends what you got. It totally depends who you have in front of you. You kind of work to their strengths. Not work to you do the opposite. You kind of figure out what their weaknesses are.
Mm-hmm.
Utilize their strengths and try to improve upon their weaknesses. Everybody's different. I kind of look at an athlete and I kind of see all right, do we have a Clydesdale here? Or do we have, I don't mean Clydesdale from the weight perspective, but just from the type of horse, Clydesdale or thoroughbred,
mm-hmm.
And your thoroughbreds, you handle them differently than your Clydesdales. The Clydesdales take a hell of a beat,
mm-hmm.
right? You can pump them you can just throw volume at them like nobody's business,
mm-hmm.
and they're going to be fine. Your thoroughbreds, you got to be careful. You just really have to be careful. They are finely tuned machines, and they can break very, very easily. So I don't know if that answers the question. Can you say the question again?
Yeah, just how do you approach developing an athlete?
Oh, just try to identify what the weaknesses are.
Uh-huh.
I think and then work on those in very small, subtle, tiny little ways over the course of time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the biggest issues that an athlete may have is they hire a coach and then they think it's just going to work, right? No, you make tiny little deposits in the improvement account mm-hmm. over the course of time. Change happens. True change happens in such a way that you don't even notice it, right? And so if you change as a coach or an athlete changes as an athlete, and they don't even know enough to celebrate it because they don't realize it, then that's good. That's good change. That's lasting change. And so you try to look for the ways that are going to. But what I'm trying to say is that change happens in tiny, tiny little increments, little deposits, mm-hmm. And conversations and small little workout results. You don't get a 15-watt jump. You get a quarter-watt jump. Every couple days. You don't even notice it. You don't improve in the pool by 5 seconds per 100. You improve in the pool by a second per 100 over 2 months. That's real improvement. The rest is kind of diluted. It's not. It's it's not real. It's not going to happen. It's not a reasonable expectation. I was just looking at my bookshelf and I thought I had that Scott Tinley book, which was
oh man,
I don't.
That's too bad. You should have it framed.
I'm gonna kind of I'm gonna ask you another like on the spot question because I think it fits in with kind of what you're talking about. But an athlete that you've worked with, Lenny Ramsey, I think embodies exactly what you were just talking about. Small improvements over time, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, Lenny's on the podium again. Lenny's on the podium again. Lenny's on the podium again. And then it becomes this thing that everybody expects, and people begin to think of like, oh yeah, like she's always on the podium. And then you're like, well, actually that took a while. Like it's like the whole, like the overnight success that took 10 years.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you wouldn't mind like sort of talking about it, like a specific athlete approach in working with her. Like what were the things that you saw with her that you wanted to develop, and then what did you do to make that development happen?
I mean, the most obvious one on her is the swim, and that it just is a work in progress, right? And it continues to be a work in progress, and it will always be a work in progress. Luckily, we lucked out kind of that she lives in Texas now, and apparently in Texas there wasn't a virus. Therefore, she's been able to swim the whole time, right? So she didn't lose out on any swim body. That's been really good. But the other one was she just had a weakness on the bike, and we went right after that. At the same time she had a weakness on the bike, she has a weapon on the run. And so we went after that bike. It was kind of it's like the low-hanging fruit, I guess. I remember when I first even had the thought of triathlon. I was running at Stonehill College, and the women's track coach, brought in Karen Smyers to speak to our team because she lived in the area. And Karen Smyers had said, if you can swim and you can run, you should be a triathlete because anyone can learn how to bike. Right? and I have not found that to be the case personally, but I kind of took that approach, like we can make this happen. And Lenny's issues on the bike were very obvious to be strength related. Okay. If you think of biking as fitness and strength, okay? How big a gear can you push? Strength. How quickly can you push it? Fitness, right? She, the way she is a runner, she has no limitations fitness wise, right? But she can only push so big a gear. So that's what we went after. Now you watch her ride. I mean, if she ever breaks 68 RPMs, so we did so much big gear work with her that I think now she can't not ride it in a big gear. We've lucked out that because sometimes if you do that, I mean, that's an approach, and I think that's an approach that TJ uses. TJ would do his recovery rides, TJ Thompson, at like 120 watts, but 50 RPMs, right? That kind of thing, just creating that muscle tension. So we created an atmosphere of muscle tension on her. And it has worked. Now she's riding in all the Zwift Pro races, and she's doing really good. I mean, that's what we have right now, right? But we're seeing huge improvements on her bike. Now, if Zwift would create a swimming game, that would be fantastic. But that's the other thing with Lenny. Lenny is a special case, I will say, because she is one of the most level-headed people I have ever come across. Like, she is steady. Every now and again, there's like a little something that could resemble a meltdown, but it's not real, and it goes away real quick. So she is really, really steady and patient, and I think she's a PhD in neuroscience. You don't get a PhD by being impatient, and you don't get it in neuroscience without understanding a little bit something about how the brain and psyche work. So she's just good at that,
Yeah, I remember talking to her in Cozumel this past year, and we were talking about the same thing. And she was like, well, like, it's like a lot of zone one work for like 2 or 3 years. And I just kept doing it. And then I got really fast.
So it's funny, some notable athletes who I just I saw the change happen, right? And there was a common thread. You know both Lenny and Best Shot, right?
Yeah.
And both of them, when they came to me, just if I'd make the joke, if I had said, okay, what we're gonna do today is you're gonna start here and you're just gonna run into the wall 10 times, right? Just pound your head into the wall. We'll take 30 seconds between each. Do it again, right? They would do it, right? They just let me do to them what was going to be done, and it worked, right? One thing we've always said at QT2 is our philosophy, our protocols really work well, okay, if you utilize them. If you don't, well, they're kind of limited, turns out. So, but those two athletes in particular, who they basically just let me do what was going to be done, and they let me do the protocol and the philosophies on them.
So one of the things that that QT2 has kind of paved the way in, and has now been like industry standard, is the recreation of the zone structure for triathlon. Can you tell us a little bit about the zones, about those zones?
No, I would like you to tell me why you say that.
Well, I mean, USAT has adopted them now. And I think that that we are, like, as an industry, hopefully, certainly CBCG, certainly USAT, certainly QT2, moving away from like the more complicated, less useful style of zone creation. And I'd just love to know a little bit more about like where that came from for you, like where those.
So years and years ago, I would tell Jesse, I said, I will not be happy until when somebody says zone 1, they're talking about our zone 1. That's when I'll be happy. When somebody says zone 2, then, and so when you say like how perhaps we have played a role in recreating the zone structure, I hear myself saying to Jesse in his living room back,
Oh, I'm so glad I could close that loop.
I won't be happy until zone 1 is our zone 1.
Awesome.
So our zone structure is basically, the whole thing is aerobic. It's all of our zones are defined as a percentage of the threshold, and we don't have any zones that are defined that are greater than the threshold. So our zone 1 is now I'm going to screw it up. It's 80 to 86% of threshold. Zone 2 is 86 to 93%, and zone 3 is 93 to 100%. Zone R, our recovery zone, is like below 76% of threshold. There's a gap of about 4%, not low, and that exists to make sure that there is nothing that could look like a gray middling between recovery and aerobic. Anything else that when we talk about something being above threshold, so greater than 100% of threshold, we say just take the heart rate strap off. We're not like, we don't measure by heart rate, anymore. And is that the answer you're looking for?
Yeah, and why? Like, why did you want to improve upon what was the existing standard?
Oh, I don't think we thought of it like that. I think we thought of it as it was just easier. I mean,
yeah.
I guess I never even paid any attention to any of the others. I know that there was like zone 1, 2, 3. There's like a 4A, 4B, 5. It got to be too much, right? And all of this is happening, right? We're talking about stuff that is occurring at elevated heart rates, right? These zones. And when the heart rate gets elevated, the mind gets shut off a bit. And the last thing I need is to be thinking, am I in 4A, 4B, or 4C? I have no idea. And so it's just simpler. And because basically for us, triathlon, anything over a mile of running, right? A mile we consider to be 50-50 between aerobic versus anaerobic, like 50-50. Anything above a mile of running is primarily an aerobic event. like a 5K is 85% aerobic. So therefore, a sprint triathlon, it ain't a sprint. It's an aerobic race. So we train, we focus on the aerobic system. Have we received some impatience over that sometimes? Yeah, and athletes who want to get, I would call it, endorphin rushes. Maybe we're not like the place to go if you want an endorphin rush, right? We are long, steady aerobic training. And it's when sometimes I have to have the kind of come to Jesus conversation with athletes of like, are you training or exercising? Because there's a difference. And there's not anything wrong with either or, right? But if you are training, then it looks like this. If you're exercising for a high, then you got to go somewhere else. We're not going to do that. We don't do that. Not that we don't do that. We just, like, that's not our primary purpose. Right. And I guess, so that's a long way of saying, we focus on aerobic training, and if it's not aerobic, we don't measure it with heart rate. Okay, we measure it primarily with wattage.
Great.
Right? Or perceived exertion.
How much, like, and I know not like an everybody, but like on average, would you guess like how much of that higher intensity work is an athlete going to end up doing per like a microcycle, whether that cycle is 4 days, 7 days, 10 days, whatever? Like how much of that higher intensity work do you prescribe? And what do you kind of call higher intensity?
Well, I mean, I would consider anything above zone 2 starts to get, like, zone 3 can really start to feel like a best effort type situation, especially when measured by heart rate because of the lag. Yes. And so I will tend to utilize probably power and or pace around zone 3 type efforts. What percentage? Depends on the volume of the athlete, of course, but probably not going to above threshold, the highest volume athletes, the athletes who are training 22 to 25 hours a week, maybe more, they shouldn't be seeing much more than 75 to 90 minutes. I mean, that would be a lot total between bike and run total in above threshold. I mean, and that would be, I would consider that to be, I'm not even comfortable with that answer. Let's call it closer to an hour. Swimming's different. We do treat swimming different because the propensity for injury is so much lower. So we don't have to be as careful there, but you do have to be careful of burnout, with swimming. But
I love that answer.
Yeah,
I'm so excellent. Satisfied with that
excellent.
answer.
Chris is grinning.
I get it because it's your challenge, right? And so you probably talk to a lot of athletes who they hired a coach, they want to work hard, right? It's not. I mean, if anything, it's a kudos to the athlete. They want to work hard. Great, that's better than somebody who doesn't want to work hard. But you don't really, the person who goes to the effort to hire a coach tends probably not to be the person who needs the motivation to work hard. They're the person who needs the leash, right? And so it's the coach's job to provide that leash more than anything, typically.
Right. So you are currently sitting on our quarantine project where we have taken this time and created an online gym and education platform. What kind of projects are you taking on during this time? What have you been up to in this period?
Why, was I supposed to do something?
No, that's a super valid.
No kidding. No, that's really good. I think this kind of piggybacks with a conversation we had earlier. Like, what are the things we can do? and this time changes, right? And this is something, the kind of thing that you're doing right now, has that COVID was the catalyst, right? But I imagine it will live on, right? Because it's a good idea. Why wouldn't it?
Thank you.
What are the kinds of things that we've been doing? Oh, geez. A little more towards like virtual type racing and stuff. So we started like a virtual race series internally for QT2 athletes, really to give them something to do. It started with, honestly, we had like 27 athletes who were doing the Boston Marathon, and I don't know if you heard, they canceled it. And I just said, we got to give them something to do. I mean, these people, they were 3 weeks away when it was postponed at the time. And so we created like a weekend marathon challenge for them, and which was fun. But that dovetailed into creating virtual duathlons and then virtual triathlons. And now, like right now, we are in the midst of. So I got together with so QT2 joined forces with 4 race directors in New England, and we created a New England virtual triathlon.
Awesome.
And so we've had I think we have about 300 registrants. We had a competitive race on Sunday, which it was a duathlon because I didn't want to force people in the water. But you run, and then we used the bike meetup functionality on Zwift to bike, and then you had to run immediately thereafter and beat me the times, and I figured it all out. But so we had 2 classes. It was a competitive class that had about 65 people in it, and then we have a participatory class that is 230 whatever people. And that you just have to do it, but the whole goal of it was to create this engagement. And so the registration was probably like, I think it was $35, and you could upgrade your registration for $25, get a T-shirt, which makes a donation to the Greater Boston Food Bank.
Awesome.
And I ended up collecting like a whole bunch of like industry supported, like Brian at Fast Splits and Bike Bond, to give special offers to athletes. And so I call them the grab bag item. So when an athlete submits their results, they choose what I call a grab bag. They choose a special offer from an industry retailer, and then the race directors are giving like race vouchers to the people who register, and we have a fantastic raffle with like over $8,000 worth of prizes. So that's going on from the 28th through July 5th.
That's great.
Yeah, that's been a lot.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot.
That's a big project.
Yeah, it was actually.
That's awesome. Yeah, congratulations.
We've got a couple questions in chat for you that will. Do you integrate the core diet when training QT2 athletes?
Yes, I completely forgot to mention. Yes, we all of our QT2 athletes meet with and get a nutrition plan and a fueling plan from one of our registered dietitians, and then some ongoing work to make sure they understand the concepts and philosophies of the core diet. The core diet is kind of lives in 2 of our 5 cornerstones. Don't ask me. I'm going to screw them up. Whenever you have groups of like 4 or 5 cornerstone type things, that's the kind of thing you can always remember 4 on the spot. But at QT2, we really focus on two of our cornerstones being race fueling, proper race fueling. That was probably the biggest factor in my own transformation as an athlete, was race fueling. And then just day-to-day better nutrition, like just so we focus on those things, and the core diet, the primary philosophy of the core diet being the most basic is the closer you can come to pulling it out of the ground, picking it off a tree, or killing it, the better it is.
That's on all of your T-shirts, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Closest you can come
ground,
to
tree, kill. Core diet. Awesome. One of our other questions is, how do you go about recognizing strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah. You just know. Kind of like in the same way of how do you know if you click with someone. We have some tests. Okay, so swimming wise, you know, because a lot of this oftentimes has to be done remotely, right? And so and virtually, and that's the world we live in. And so from a swimming sense, we try to measure. One such thing is to kind of compare time trial times in a pool based upon with a buoy and without a buoy to get a sense of, and there's a certain factor that we find acceptable and unacceptable based upon whether balance is an issue. Most often than not, balance is the biggest issue in the water. You know, very rarely does anyone need to be in better shape to swim faster in the water. We are not limited by our fitness in the water. Okay, we are limited by our relationship with the water, most notably balance. And so we look at how somebody swims, you know, when they are aided and when they are not. On the bike, oftentimes you will find, so in the case of somebody like a Lenny, where I talked about her being strength limited, she would have, and this was the case for me too, and it would not be the case for you, Chris. She would have trouble getting her heart rate up on the bike because she just, and I did not possess the musculature, I don't know if that's a word, to get her heart rate up. You know, her aerobic engine was greater than her muscle mass, and so we identified a strength limiter. Running, oftentimes is running form. That's probably but that can also be. But running form is just not like this. That could be different strengths or imbalances that may exist in you know, somebody. It's, you know, sometimes it's just making a cognitive change in how you run, right? Other times it's just muscle. Like you can't make that change because your body won't do that because it has imbalances. And so you have to kind of attack those. Then you have your mental. I don't mean mental, but you know, you have the. When we talk about weaknesses, was that the word? I guess your mental fitness challenges. Let's use that because I don't want to use the term mental weakness. But your mental fitness challenges. Those just have a nice way of revealing themselves over the course of time. And you know how one describes, you just watch. I just watch and I read, and you know, over the course of a conversation, you can tell when somebody is overly hard, you know, the kind of overly harsh on themselves. No matter what you say, they'll find a way to put themselves down, you know. And so you just kind of have to, that's definitely more of a watch and be aware of things.
Watchful,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We have another question from someone who feels like you are clearly a Celtics fan and wants to know who your favorite player is.
Well, Larry Bird. Come on. although so a couple of weeks ago I was watching a playoff game from I think it was 1987. It was the Celtics versus the Pistons when Bird stole the ball on the inbound pass. That was like I remember where I was. It was like a great
Kevin McHale layup.
DJ Dennis Johnson.
That's right.
But I think around that time, Scott Wedman was on the team. I liked Scott Wedman. He was a bench player, but when he came in, he had a hot hand from the outside. And then I saw Greg Kite, who was the backup center, who I always perceived as he just sucked. And he did suck. Like now I've watched it 35 years later, he actually did suck. But yeah, Larry Bird, I'm sorry.
That just one of our questions to take us out is so you you own and run a small business. Most of what you
I
do
don't
is
own
that.
I don't own anything.
You don't own anything. You run a
Nope.
small business.
Yeah.
What do you do when you're not working or coaching? What do you enjoy doing outside of this stuff?
Well, that's a challenging question. You could ask me that on any given day, and I could give you any different answer. I like to read, think, and make connections between thoughts, and yeah, that's what I like to do.
Nice.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
Makes total sense.
Okay,
I like it. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Molly and I have been wanting to talk to you specifically for a long time in this context, and we really appreciate you coming on. You're definitely somebody that we both look up to in terms of coaching and business management.
We ask you a lot of questions.
Yeah, for those of you watching, we grilled Tim for like 30 minutes beforehand.
And for like all of the endurance exchange in Tempe. We were like, so Tim, tell us more about
what should we do? It goes without saying, I really look up to you as a coach and as somebody who, is kind of fighting the good fight in this industry. And working with athletes to make them better athletes, but also just more like sensible and sensitive people. And so thank you so much for doing that and being that, and for joining us tonight on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Thanks for being here. This was awesome.
I was going to try and work the word apotheosis into it, but I just can't.
Next time, you're gonna work that into use it in a sentence, right? For everyone out there in endurance school land, make sure you join us tomorrow morning for yoga with Amy BT at 6:30 a.m. And then we will be back for Zwift group ride on Thursday morning. And Tim, thank you again. This was just wonderful. We will see you soon. And everybody out there, thanks for joining. Bye, guys. Here's to a faster and happier tomorrow.
And Keen.